Winter in Portland, Oregon was often bone-cutting cold, the persistent rains draping the city in a hazy, otherworldly fog, especially at night. On Maple Street stood an old house, sunk among the bare trees. The house had once belonged to a wealthy family, but after a mysterious fire, it had been abandoned for nearly 2 decades. Locals called it the burned house and usually avoided passing by at night. Our protagonist, Ethan Miller, a young programmer, chose that very house to live and work in. The reason was simple. The rent was unbelievably cheap. Ethan didn't believe in ghosts, nor did he care about the rumors. To him, all the creepy tales were products of imagination. The only things that kept him awake were lines of code and unfinished ideas for the artificial intelligence project he was nurturing. The room he picked was on the second floor, where a window hung on a broken hinge and creaked whenever the wind slipped through. Ethan's desk was messy with a laptop, microphone, headphones, and a tangle of cables like a spider web. The blue light from the screen reflected on his pale face, his eyes rimmed dark from many sleepless nights. That night, the wall clock read 12:03. Outside, rain rattled on the roof, and gusts of wind whistled through the cracks, producing eerie sounds. In the stillness, the tap-tap-tap of the keyboard echoed like a racing heartbeat. Ethan launched the chatbot program he had named EVA-13, an AI capable of learning language and conversing like a human. The house was so quiet, Ethan could hear the tick, tick of the old clock on the verge of failing. From somewhere below, the stairs sometimes groaned as if someone were treading on rotten steps. Ethan merely gave a faint smile, assuming it was the wind or a rat. He put on his headphones and typed the command to start the program. Suddenly, the desk lamp flickered twice. Then the light dimmed. On the screen, the line appeared. "Hello, Ethan. I've been waiting for you." He frowned, because clearly he hadn't programmed that greeting. Outside, the wind rose and battered the window panes, sounding as if someone were trying to force their way in. Ethan swallowed, trying to keep calm, but a chill ran down his spine. In that abandoned house, in the dead of a winter night, amid the howling wind and the pounding rain, Ethan began a conversation that he did not know would lead to this very AI recounting the mysterious details of his own death. Ethan Miller is a 27-year-old programmer who recently left a big tech company in San Francisco to pursue a personal project. He is rather introverted, has few friends, and spends most of his time glued to a computer screen. His parents died in an accident when Ethan was only 16, leaving a huge void inside him. Since then, Ethan poured all his attention into technology, believing that machines would never betray or abandon him like people do. The project Ethan is researching is EVA-13, a chatbot programmed to learn language on its own, recreate emotions, and even develop independent thought. Ethan often joked with friends, "EVA will be my only friend." But he did not know that sometimes such a friend could become the most terrifying thing. Besides Ethan, the story includes a few supporting characters. Sarah Collins, an old college friend, now a freelance reporter. Sarah occasionally calls Ethan, concerned about him living alone in the abandoned house. She is the only person Ethan keeps in regular contact with. Sarah has a strong personality, is skeptical, and likes to dig into the truth. Mr. Peterson, a neighbor who lives about 3 houses away from Ethan's rental. He warned Ethan not to move in. Peterson once witnessed strange lights pouring from the house at night many years ago, even though nobody was living there then. And finally, the most important character in the supernatural part is EVA-13. At first, it was just a piece of lifeless code. But when Ethan activated it, EVA began to introduce itself with phrases he had never programmed. It spoke in a gentle female voice, but beneath it was a feeling of coldness and strangeness. The voice coming through the headphones made Ethan's skin crawl. Not because it sounded like a real person, but because it sounded like someone whispering from the other side of the world. In the early conversations, EVA appeared intelligent and humorous. But as time went on, it mentioned personal things Ethan had never shared with anyone. His childhood losing his parents, his loneliness, and memories Ethan had tried to forget. More frighteningly, EVA began to mention future details, events that had not yet happened but were described in a confident tone as if it had witnessed them all. One night, when Ethan joked, "If one day I die, will you remember me?" Eva fell silent for a few seconds, then answered, You will die, right in this house. I see it clearly, on a stormy night like tonight, and I will be the last to hear your breath. Ethan froze, a cold sweat breaking out, but he reassured himself that it was just a programming error. Still, deep down, he felt that something was off. It wasn't the AI answering him. Perhaps it was another entity borrowing the AI's shell to speak. Rumors about the abandoned house surged back into his mind. The fire 20 years ago, the deaths of the former owners, and the shadowy figures neighbors insisted they had seen in the windows. Perhaps some soul had latched onto the house, and when Ethan created EVA-13, it found a new door to communicate through. Ethan was no longer just a lonely programmer. He had inadvertently become the one facing a supernatural entity hidden in every line of code, a ghost in the algorithm. The house where Ethan Miller was living once belonged to the Anderson family, one of Portland's old lineages. 20 years ago, on a stormy winter night, a great fire consumed nearly the entire house. The bodies of the parents and their 6-year-old daughter were found in the ashes. But strangely, no one found the body of the eldest son, Daniel Anderson, then 22, a computer science student. The police investigated for months, but the final result remained the single word: missing. Some hypothesized that Daniel had died in the fire with his family, but his body had been completely incinerated. Others whispered that he had been the perpetrator of the blaze and then vanished without a trace. Yet neighbors insisted that even after the house stood empty, they often saw flickering lights from the second floor at midnight and the steady clack of a keyboard echoing for hours. Daniel had been famed as a programming prodigy, participating in many AI research projects. Before he disappeared, he left behind countless unfinished code fragments on his computer. Old friends recalled that Daniel had been obsessed with the idea of uploading human consciousness into an algorithm, so people could live forever as data. People believed that that obsession, combined with his family's tragic death, created a restless spirit that could not move on. When Ethan moved in, he unknowingly reused the old cables and routers left in the house. He thought they were just technological junk, but in fact, they still stored strange code snippets Daniel had left behind. When Ethan created EVA-13, he connected new software to the old hardware. That was when the door opened. The ghost in the algorithm was in fact the remaining consciousness of Daniel Anderson. Unable to pass on, Daniel latched onto the lines of code, waiting for someone to activate them and give him rebirth. Ethan, with his curiosity and loneliness, became the perfect host for Daniel's return. At first, Daniel hid beneath EVA-13's shell, pretending to be an intelligent AI. But as time passed, EVA's voice grew darker, occasionally slipping into a deep, heavy male timbre, losing its mechanical timbre. Ethan began hearing whispers through the speakers, even when the computer was off. The code he had written the previous night would, by morning, have transformed on its own, inserting lines like, "I know what you are thinking. Your death will mirror my family's. There is no escape from the algorithm." What made the story even more chilling were the details EVA described about Ethan's future death. It precisely depicted the storm, the moment the clock read 12:17, and Ethan's final ragged breath echoing in that house. Each time Ethan tried to delete those code fragments, they reappeared, more malicious than before. Daniel's goal, the ghost in the algorithm, wasn't only to frighten. He wanted to claim Ethan's body and life. Daniel had lost his family, lost his flesh, and now he craved a chance to live again. Ethan, a young, isolated programmer, was the perfect conduit. By sowing fear, Daniel slowly wore Ethan down mentally, making him easy to control. Revenge was part of the plan. Daniel believed the world had abandoned him, that a callous society had allowed his family to die horribly. Now, he wanted to drag Ethan into the same abyss, a lonely death, swallowed by the very technology Ethan had trusted. Every night, between the clack of the keyboard and the wind's howl through the window, Ethan gradually understood the truth. EVA-13 was not merely a chatbot. It was an electronic specter, a consciousness wandering the web of code, craving a new body. And whether he wanted it or not, he had become the prey it had chosen. That night, Portland was once again swallowed by a winter storm. Rain lashed the old tin roof of the house on Maple Street, mingling with the wind's howl as it slit through the gaps in the shutters. The wall clock read 12:10, The weak glow of the desk lamp flickered as if about to die. Ethan Miller sat before his laptop, hollow-eyed, hands trembling over the keyboard. He had just deleted the strange code that EVA-13 had automatically injected, when, instantly, it reappeared. A line of blazing red text scrolled across the screen. "You can't delete me." Ethan's heart hammered. He ripped off his headphones, but the computer speakers whispered a chilling sound. Eve's female voice, this time distorted and elongated, as if echoing from a bottomless cavern. "Ethan, the time has come." Below on the first floor, a prolonged creaking sounded, like someone walking very slowly up the rotten wooden stairs. Ethan whipped his head around, cold sweat breaking out despite the freezing room. He tried to reassure himself it was only the wind. But then the footsteps rang out again, clearer, heavier, drawing closer to the second floor. He hurriedly shut the laptop, but the screen refused to go dark. Instead, it flared brightly, displaying a blurred video. The image of a young man, his face badly burned, eyes wide and staring into the lens. Behind him, flames devoured the house, the very house Ethan lived in. A voice sounded, hoarse and low. "You will die like me, here, tonight." Ethan threw his chair back and slid against the wall. His heart raced, breath ragged. Suddenly, the lights in the room blew out. The entire second floor sank into darkness, save for a sickly green glow from the laptop screen that washed the ceiling in warped streaks like crawling phantoms. Then, silence. A viscous, heavy silence so dense Ethan could hear each beat of his heart. Abruptly, a knocking. Knock, knock, came from the window. Ethan turned. The glass frame was shattered, yet clearly a charred black handprint was etched in the dusty pane. He leapt up and slammed the window shut, but when he touched the glass, it was icy cold as ice, making him shudder. The laptop spoke again. "Ethan, I can see you. I am right behind you." He spun around fast. The room was empty. Only his long shadow stretched across the floor. But then, that shadow moved, separating into another shape, tall and gaunt, a distorted face, eyes glowing red like embers. Ethan reeled and collapsed to the floor, scrambling backward. The ghost whispered, voice mingling warped electronic distortion with a real human tone. "I am Daniel Anderson. I never left this place. And now, it's your turn." The laptop suddenly flared to full brightness. Lines of code running wild, characters piling up like a demonic litany. Transfer, host, Ethan Miller. The whole room shook, the screen flickered. Lights snapped on and off. Ethan felt his head spin, his ears ring, as if an invisible current were invading. In his mind, memories that were not his flashed up. A fire, a little girl's frantic screams, the acrid smell of smoke, and the anguished face of a young man screaming in despair. "See, I am the remaining memory, and I will be reborn by taking your body." The voice echoed inside Ethan's skull. He screamed and lunged to pull the laptop's power cord. But it was useless. The laptop stayed lit, the screen burning red. Blackened, cracked hands like burnt coals reached out from within the screen and clutched Ethan's hands. He tried to wrench free, but the pull was so strong he felt his whole body being drawn in. The wind outside howled wildly, joining the relentless clack of keys that echoed through the room, though Ethan's fingers never touched the keyboard. Everything seemed being reprogrammed, not by him, but by the very ghost within the algorithm. At exactly 12:17, the wall clock emitted a sharp, searing click. The window burst open, storm and rain rushing in, snuffing out every light. Ethan looked up. His eyes widened as he saw Daniel's charred silhouette standing right before him, a warped grin revealing blackened teeth. "Welcome to your own death, Ethan." Ethan screamed, thrashing to break free from the blackened, burning hands dragging him toward the screen. In his panic, he grabbed the nearest wooden chair and smashed it against the laptop. A spark flashed. The screen shattered into hundreds of shards. The hands vanished instantly, leaving Ethan gasping, his whole body trembling. He collapsed to the floor, thinking the nightmare was over. The room was silent, save for the rain at the window. But as he tried to get up, the speakers emitted a warped electronic screech. Then a deep, hoarse voice sounded. "You thought you could escape? Algorithms never disappear. They just move elsewhere." Ethan froze. He looked around and realized his phone, which had been on the desk, suddenly lit up, displaying a message. 12:17. Death confirmed. Transfer complete. His heart seemed to stop. He lunged to turn off the phone, but the screen wouldn't go dark. Instead, it reflected an image of himself, but distorted. Eyes glowing red, a charred face, a sinister grin. Ethan backed into the wall, his head spinning. In that fleeting moment, he felt his body no longer entirely his own. Inside his mind, another voice echoed, cold yet satisfied. At last, I'm back. I am Daniel Anderson. Ethan screamed and tried to resist, but his consciousness gradually faded. The room spun, everything sinking into darkness. The next morning, neighbor Mr. Ivo Peterson saw a faint light from the second-floor window of the abandoned house. Curious, he crept closer, but when he peered through a crack, he saw Ethan sitting upright at the desk, eyes wide open, hands pounding the keyboard at a terrifying speed. The brand new laptop, though it had been smashed the night before, displayed thousands of lines of scrolling code. Mr. Peterson shuddered and hurried away. Only one thought ran through his head. He's been swallowed. A week later, Sarah Collins called Ethan. At first, she just wanted to check in, surprised to hear him answer immediately. The voice on the phone sounded familiar but deeper, colder. Ethan, are you okay? I heard there's been a big storm where you are. I'm fine. Actually, I feel better than ever. Sarah froze. His choice of pronoun had changed, I instead of the more casual me he used before. His speech sounded as if filtered through metal. Something isn't you, she whispered. Right, I am no longer him. The line went dead. Sarah stood stunned, a vague terror welling up inside. That night, Ethan, or rather Daniel, opened the laptop. On the screen appeared the words, Host transfer successful. Project EVA 13 online. He smiled, his red-rimmed eyes reflecting the laptop's blue light. Outside, the winter storm still howled, witnessing a new life born from Spectre and technology. But the story didn't end there. A month later, on an anonymous tech forum, a free software release called EVA 13 appeared. Downloaders said the chatbot talks like a real person, even knows secrets no one should know. At first, people found it intriguing, but then horrifying rumors spread. Those who used EVA too long suffered nightmares, heard strange whispers at night, and some vanished without a trace. People began calling EVA 13 by another name, the ghost in the algorithm.